to our May meeting of the Asheville Urban Forestry Commission. Happy to see everybody here. So first of all, I guess let's go around and introduce ourselves. So first of all, I'm Amy Smith, the chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. So Patrick?
Patrick Gilbert, vice chair of the Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, Ed?
Ed Macy, member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
And Sharon?
Sorry, Sharon, Urban Forestry Commission, Technical Review Committee person.
All right, and Stephen Hendricks?
Stephen Hendricks, Urban Forestry Commission.
Thank you. And Cecil?
Cecil Bothwell, 8-year council liaison to the Tree Commission and member of the Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, and I don't see Perrin. Hey, I'll let him introduce himself in a second when he gets settled in. Roy, how about Dawn?
Hi, Dawn Chavez, Executive Director of Asheville Greenworks and Urban Forestry Commission member.
All right, Perrin, I see you just jumped in. We're just introducing ourselves. If you want to take a minute and introduce yourself. You're on mute.
Hi, I'm Perrin DeYoung, and I'm learning how to use a computer. I am a member of the Urban Forestry Commission. It's good to be here with you today.
Thank you. And Kim Roney, I saw was here. Go ahead.
Kim Roney, City Council Liaison to the Urban Forestry Commission. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. All right, and we have city staff. So Haley.
Hi, I'm Haley Mahoney. I'm a planning technician with Development Services and an assistant to the Urban Forestry Commission.
Thanks. Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Watford. I'm the Site Engineering Development Coordinator in Development Services and the staff liaison to the Urban Forestry Commission.
All right, thank you. And Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Blevins. I'm an urban planner with the Development Services Department.
Thanks. Let's see, I see Chris Collins.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Collins with the Development Services Department as well.
All right, Mark.
Hey there, Mark Foster, City Arborist with the City of Asheville Public Works Department.
All right, thank you. And Vidila, do you want to introduce yourself on the phone there?
Sure, it's Vidila Sadika, Planning Department.
Thanks. Did I get everybody from city staff? There might be some people I don't know yet, so feel free to unmute. All right, then I know we have some representatives from our alternative compliance. So if you want to just take turns, introduce yourselves, go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is Chris Day with Civil Design Concepts. We're the civil engineer for the project here at Foundation, and for the one that's before you today, as well as the history of the redevelopment we've done down there and preservation. So appreciate time here before you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Matt.
Hey everybody, it's Matt Sprouse with Sitework Studios. We're the landscape architect on both of these alternative compliance requests that Chris is here with us for. So we appreciate being here and look forward to presenting the projects to you.
Go ahead, Gabriel.
I'm Gabriel Delarmy, and I'm a landscape architect with Sitework Studios.
All right, thanks. Thank you. And Gina, go ahead. We're going to introduce you more later, but if you want to just say hi.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gina Smith. I'm the interim coordinator for the Asheville Buncombe Food Policy Council.
All right, thank you. Did I miss anyone? I see Sean. I don't think I know you, Sean. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, sorry. Keep freezing in and out with the thunder. I'm Sean Sains. I work for Civil Design Concepts and part of the team for submitting for the Foundation Studios project.
All right, thank you. I think that's everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. So next we have approval of minutes. We didn't have the minutes ready from the last meeting last time, so we have several to go through here. So we have, can we do them all together? Unless there's any objection. We have January, February, and March. We had no meeting in April. So I just need a motion and a second to approve these minutes.
So move.
I second.
All right, thank you. We have to do a roll call vote. So I'm going to go in the order that I introduced everybody in. So Patrick?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Perrin?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you very much. So next we have alternative compliance. We have two separate cases, but they're in the same development area. So what we're going to do is have city staff present the staff report. Then the folks here from the site will talk about their request, and then we will vote on them separately, but we can do the discussion all together. So I think Jennifer has the first information, and we have a PowerPoint, I believe. Go ahead, Chris, I see your hand up. Go ahead. No? Okay. Okay, then
Sorry,
Jennifer, when you're
I
ready.
did not mean to do that.
Psych. That's
okay. Okay. Hi, I'm Jennifer Blevins, and these projects are down at Foundation Studios on the access drive known as Foundy Street. Most of you are familiar with the development by participating in the request for the other buildings that have been brought online over the course of the last 3 or 4 years now. I guess they've been working on that project. If you were not a part of the commission, you probably are familiar with it just from driving by or visiting the businesses that have opened there. So we have number 11 and number 36 Foundy Street today. And they are, as before, they are requesting a reduction in the size of the plant materials, in some of the numbers of the plant materials required. And in lieu of shrubs, in some cases, they are planting native shrub-like grasses and perennials. If you've been out there, you have seen over time the other projects come on and the growth of the materials and how that is looking as they mature. Number 11 Foundy Street is tiny little building and is being renovated, and they're required a very small amount of landscaping. Parking lot landscaping, they're required to have 1 large maturing tree and 4 shrubs. Building impact, 1 tree and 2 shrubs. And so the total requirement, 2 trees, 1 of those being a large maturing tree and 6 shrubs. And what they're proposing in lieu of that is they are providing those 2 trees, but they are requesting to install them at smaller sizes than our typical standard. They're also providing 6 shrubs and then adding 100 native shrub-like grasses and perennials. And at 36 Foundy Street, much larger building, larger area and parking lot. They are required 19 trees, 14 of which must be large maturing, and 76 shrubs. For the parking lot landscaping, building impact, 48 trees, 96 shrubs. So a total requirement of 67 trees, 14 large maturing, and 172 shrubs. They are proposing in lieu of that 48 trees, and 14 of them are the large maturing, so they meet that requirement. And most of the plant materials are smaller at planting. Then they're also going to provide 69 shrubs and 1,331 shrub-like grasses and perennials. So we've evaluated this request, and we concur that the industrial nature of the site limited soil and compacted soil might inhibit growth and make it difficult for the required plant materials to survive. Planting at the smaller sizes seems to encourage them to settle in better. And the redevelopment of the overall site is almost complete, and these requests today are consistent with what you have approved for the other buildings at the site that have been coming online over the past few years. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And as you met earlier, Matt Sprouse is here with SiteWorks Studios and can answer any specific questions you might have about the plant materials.
And Jennifer, this is Chris Day. I'll jump in for just
Sure.
a quick second. And excuse me, and say that I really want to thank you and all of city staff. It's really been a lot of hard work over these years to take this industrial urban setting and rejuvenate it and turn it into this unique location that we have out there. And the efforts of the city in terms of working with these buildings and how to preserve and create the setting that we have out there. It's we couldn't have done it without the city. So I appreciate that. And in turn also with this commission in the past, as Matt came on board to kind of say, hey, this is not your typical UDO setting that outlines the landscaping plan. And this is really an industrial and urban setting, and we need to create a plant material and type of palette that's more reflective of that. We've been excited to see how that's come on board. These are the last two existing buildings being renovated out there. So this request would kind of complete the existing structures. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt to kind of talk a little bit more about that vision and the material that he does so well.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thanks everybody for having us. This is a great sort of closure to this project in a way, because we started this experiment about 3 or 4 years ago with the first building, which is the Wedge Foundation and 12 Bones. And like Chris said, we presented them with this idea of, this landscape, this existing situation was very different than a lot of places in town. It's certainly not suburban like what our landscape ordinance is sort of written for. So can we go forward with a palette and a method that's a little bit different and maybe a little bit more sustainable? And presented this idea, and you can see some precedent images up there that we shared with the client and then shared with the previous tree commission when we started this, about how we could introduce in a more urban setting a lot more pollinators, a lot more ground cover, diversity, and try to kind of create some ecological vibrancy in this, as opposed to just getting our tree counts in and our shrub counts in and having a dead ground layer. So we kind of flipped it on its side and said, well, let's see what we can do from the ground up. And so this concept has been tested now, where these are the last 2 out of the 8 that are on the site. And if you've been to the Wedge, you've seen how successful, really excited how successful this has been. And we've been excited to see how this has progressed through the site. In our requests, like Jennifer mentioned, we really have 2 requests here for alternative compliance. One is that we want to reduce slightly the tree caliper size that's going in. And that's because we found that these trees are responding better going into the slightly smaller size. The root balls get a better chance to acclimate. And what we found is at the Wedge, since when these were planted 3 years ago, they have responded and grown much faster than we expected. And the soils that are under here, these old industrial soils, they're compacted, they're low nutrient, who knows what's in them. And they also are prone to flooding. So we really wanted to give the trees a chance to really thrive. And that's why we were requesting the smaller size. And that has proven to really work in the other sites. The other is, in this environment, this river environment, the shrub layer seems a little bit contrived, and we wanted to have a more biodiverse ground layer. And so that's why we're requesting the substitution of a lot more grasses and grass-like natives and some perennials. And again, we've seen it just wildly successful on the other sites. So we're trying to continue this palette. It's part of the overall concept for the site. These last two we're just sort of stitching in with that concept. I know 11 is teeny tiny, but it's still part of the concept. And I wanted to introduce one more thing. One of the things that, as we're going through this, because this is now zoned in the RAD form code, building impact has been taken out of the landscape requirement for RAD form code. However, those plant numbers, especially those tree numbers, are in these calculations. So we're still providing for the building impact because we started this before the RAD form code was adopted. So we're still introducing the same number of trees, which now are more trees than what would be required because building impact isn't required anymore. So I'm happy to answer any questions, field any discussions on this, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, Matt, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the tree size and the shrub-like perennial ideas that you have. It sounds like you're sort of moving down a size class in both cases. So when you say a smaller tree size class, are we talking about dogwoods and redwoods as opposed to ash and maple and oak? Or what do you have in mind for that?
Oh, good question. So we're still proposing, if it's a canopy tree requirement for a street tree or for a parking lot tree, we're still providing that overall class size. So if it's a canopy tree, we're proposing a canopy tree. Where the city ordinance requires a 2.5 to 3 inch caliper install, we're proposing a 1.5 inch caliper. So it's really the overall age of the tree, a younger age tree that we're installing, so that it would give it a little bit more chance to acclimate in its root zone.
Okay, and so could you just throw out some species that might be in the mix for those tree options?
For the trees?
Yes.
Oh, sure. So the palette that we've been using out here that seems successful, sycamore is kind of our heavy hitter for our canopy trees, because we're even on 36 Foundy, we're saving 5 existing sycamores that are on the perimeter. So we're kind of keeping to that kind of river-like species mix. We're also using Eastern red cedar as one of our evergreens, and we're using a fair amount of red buds. Part of the reason of the red buds is, as you may know, they do fix nitrogen in the soil. So we are trying to remediate some of the soil while it's in there, and it's a great urban tree. They definitely hold up to this pretty tough environment.
Yeah, I've got nothing against red buds, that's for sure. So it sounds like you're saying that you're simply going to be planting in younger specimens of these canopy trees in the case when you're planting canopy trees.
That's exactly right.
Okay, and then when we talk about shrub-like perennials, would you name some species that you have in mind?
Absolutely. So we've got a nice mix that we've been using out there for a while. We're leaning heavily on the native grasses. So the andropogons, the bouteloas. There's also there's some panicum out there, so some switchgrass, a couple of different cultivars of that. Again, kind of that soil remediation, those initial pioneers of those plants, they're going to show up out there by themselves. We're just kind of introducing them into the mix early. And then on I'm going to say the perennials and the shrub-like perennials, we have some solidago or goldenrods. They tend to be a really, really good ground cover. And even in the winter, they put down that basal leaf layer that kind of holds the soil in. echinacea to add some color, so that's purple coneflower, and then some other tough plants like Amsonia or Texas Blue Star, and some agastache. You know, it's sort of a mix of grasses. Grasses don't attract pollinators as much, so we want to add in some of those really bee-friendly plants as well, which is part of the reason we want to put in something like an agastache.
Thank you. Yeah, that helps a lot.
Okay. Welcome.
Any other questions or comments for the applicants?
I'd interject, Cecil here, that I guess going back 4 years, at least 3, I've saved your recommendations for this site, and I'm using the grasses and so forth to populate my property, and I've really appreciated it.
Great. I appreciate that. That's great.
So I have a question. The reduction in the number of trees with the larger site, is that because of the shade incompatibility with the plant materials you're recommending?
We're actually not reducing the number of trees at all.
Okay, I must have misread that.
Yeah, we're reducing the number of shrubs, but we're substituting more of the perennials and grasses for those. So with the trees, we're reducing the overall size requirement going in so they have a better chance.
Okay. Well, I would agree that smaller trees catch up pretty quickly to the larger sizes, so it almost doesn't make sense in a.
Yeah, we learned that at the wedge. The sycamores that were put in 3 years ago have just skyrocketed.
Right.
Yeah.
Sharon, go ahead.
So I've been following this project, and I have the same concerns I had last time with this project, although I must say you've got a better landscape crew out there doing your maintenance, because it's not nearly through the last couple of years I've been watching this, as ratty, what I call ratty. Your grasses are effective, and I agree with your grasses. Your bee-friendly or ecological plants, they need to be replanted, respotted in. The red buds aren't doing that well and haven't done that well. They need more maintenance. They need more water or fertilizer, as you stated about the soil. So my main complaint out there has been that there's not enough good maintenance going on to sustain the look that you've got on your picture going here. If you were to take pictures of what it actually looks like, it's not looking as it could look, as if how you designed it. So I would say it needs more supervision. I totally agree with the caliper of the tree. I know in what I do for a living, the smaller caliper will catch up to a bigger caliper, and especially in poor soil. I also don't agree with how a lot of the beds are being constructed for raised beds. You've got some 2x4s with some rock out there. Some of them are done with concrete curbing. I think that the soil could be prepped better for what you're planting, whether it's more amendment, more topsoil, going down to a little deeper with more maintenance. So I think the overall look and the overall design is a good idea. I just don't think it looks like it could look. And I thought you said you were reducing the amount of trees on my notes and so evidently I'm incorrect. You're not reducing the amount of trees, just the size of the caliper?
That is correct on both counts. As a matter of fact, since building impact is not required, we're probably planting more trees.
That's
right, but you fall underneath that form base code that was changed. So
that's right.
Right. So yeah, I totally understand that. So I think that's my main complaint, as it was 2 years ago. Just needs better maintenance out there, but it's way better than what it was. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Patrick, go ahead.
Yeah, so under the proposal, just for clarification, because I'm a bit confused, under the regulations, you would be required to plant 67 trees. but you're proposing to plant 48. So I'm not clear why that's not a reduction.
So
You can go forward to the other slide.
Yeah, correct me, Matt.
Is that some
It's
of
Jennifer.
we're getting credit for some of the existing, maybe? I know.
I based these numbers, Matt, on the landscape plan you provided, and those were my counts. And correct me if they are incorrect. I came up with a total requirement of 67 trees for number 36, and that 48 trees were in total were going to be planted. So did I leave out the existing trees and the credits you were getting for those? Is that what I did?
no, I think the confusion is that in the RAD form code, the building impact landscaping has been removed as a requirement.
Is not required at all, right?
That's correct.
Exactly.
So those
And I
48
apologize
trees
for not
are-
mentioning that. Mhm.
That's it. So by our count, we're required 19 trees.
19. Mhm.
Yeah. And we are planting 21 trees. And on 36 Foundy, we're also preserving 5 large mature sycamores out there, which give us credits for 6 more trees.
Right. So I apologize all that I did not clarify that the building impact landscaping is not actually a requirement. They provided that in their calculations, but that is no longer a requirement. So they are actually providing more than they would currently be required as to numbers of trees.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Jennifer. We could have added to that confusion because I think our first submittal may have had building impact in it, and then we sent some revised plans.
I have not seen those.
There you go.
That would be it.
All right.
Yeah, and Jennifer, that form-based code that came online. It's been a little while that came online.
It's been yeah. It's
yeah, I
been
mean, it
more than
wasn't
2 years. It wasn't
right,
long after you got started out there.
Yeah, exactly. So when we made the initial submittals with the wedge and some of those first buildings, we weren't in the RAD form-based code, but our subsequent, like the submittal, the 36 and 11 were just submitted this year, and so they
right. And I'm still in the old.
Right. I thought Sharon had a question about the applicability with when we submitted, and so I was just wanting to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
these are
Sharon.
much more recent projects that have been just submitted. I think both of them in 2020 submitted and reviewed. And
All right. Looks like Perrin, did you have one more question?
Yes. So Matt, I just we started this conversation out about compaction of soils and porous soils on site. And of course, that's the case on such a heavily impacted site. So I'm just curious about plans around how to prepare and care for the tree sites where the trees are going in terms of decompaction, addition of organic matter, et cetera, along the lines of what Sharon was saying. What's your standard procedure there? What are you planning on for this site?
Well, as we mentioned, this is kind of a unique site. There's 2 things going on here. There's soil that's been underneath concrete slabs and gravel for decades. And so some of that soil, believe it or not, when we dug it up around the wedge, was river silt and was actually not too bad. And then some of it was just horrible mixes of gravel and just debris and things like that. Not to mention it being an industrial site, and I'm not saying that it's a contaminated site, but we can all assume that there's probably things in this soil being in the river, in the floodplain, that aren't so great. So there's a balance between how much of this soil you disturb and how much of it you're trying to just plant and let the plant, planting it small, which we're doing it with the trees, but we're also doing it with the perennials. We are moving almost entirely to plugs when it comes to perennials and grasses. they have the same nature. They do better. We have a much higher success rate than gallon plants. And so same kind of idea, the less you disturb, two things happen. You greatly reduce the amount of weeds because you start to disturb that old, that seed bank. So who knows what's under there from terms of a seed bank. So we're trying to kind of get that ground plane established. But then the annual maintenance of this is going to be, mulching it well to keep in, moisture to lower weeds again. And then if there is some kind of supplemental fertilizer, we're monitoring that. We're also learning. This is an experimental landscape. We are learning. There are a lot of places that are much farther ahead than us on this, in the Northeast with high line. So many things were learned with the high line and these poor soils. The Navy Yards in Philadelphia, we're using these as precedents. But we really need to kind of think about how we maintain these new urban landscapes. And again, this is kind of an experiment, and I feel like we're learning a lot and we're doing a lot of good things here.
Interesting stuff. So it sounds like you'll be relying on the plant roots to do most of the decompaction work over time.
Exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
All right. Sharon, did you have more? Oh, actually, sorry, and Steve Hendricks as well. So Steve was first, sorry. Steve and then Sharon.
Yeah, I really like the concept. I agree the challenge is the long-term maintenance and how to deal with that and see what happens and adapt to it. Just out of curiosity, my questions were answered really. Curiosity, is Foundry somebody's name, or did somebody spell Foundry wrong a long time ago?
So, honestly, I think they've been flip-flopping back and forth between Foundation Studios and Foundy. Foundy Street came from Foundation Studios, and just the fact that besides the skate park that got built on an old foundation down there that's still in existence, there is a really large mass of concrete foundation that sits right behind this building 36, and so they kind of just adopted and ran with the Foundation Studios, and that got shortened to Foundy.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
Absolutely, it's a good question.
I'd like to call the question.
One moment. Since we're approaching a public comment for alternative compliance, if we have any callers on the line that would like to speak towards the alternative compliance, please press *3.
All right, we'll see if anyone joins the call. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, I'm real familiar with this type of planting, having done a lot of it in my landscape contracting world. And I want to say, I'm putting in plugs, and you're in a small area, acreage wise, that there is no way to put this much planting in and this many plugs in without disturbing the soil all around it, without creating more of a weed situation. And that will allow for using organic fertilizers, or as you stated, lime, which will break down the soil, but other things. So I'm kind of still going with the fact that this would be a much better looking project down there if there'd be more maintenance applied to it, and the realization that you are going to disturb this soil when you go do the planting. And with as dense a planting as you've got down here, other than with your ornamental grasses, which get larger, the main trick to make this not look like a weedy mess is good maintenance. And I like to state that again, because there's a lot of time, a lot of money put into this and thought, and we'd like to see it look like something beautiful as you've got planned for it. And that's my last 2 cents on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the commission? And did we have anyone call in? Doesn't sound like we have any callers.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Cecil has called the question. So under Robert's rules, once he calls the question, that ends any further discussion or questions.
Oh,
so
sorry.
we go right to the vote.
Okay, then let's vote. So we're going to do the votes separate because they're two separate submissions. So first for 11 Foundy, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve alternative compliance as requested for 11 Foundy Street.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. So I'll go through the roll call vote. Patrick?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Perrin?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right, so that one's done. Next, 36 Foundy, a motion?
I move that we approve alternative compliance as proposed for 36 Foundy Street.
I second.
Thank you. So we'll vote. Patrick?
Aye.
Ed? Sorry, Ed,
Aye.
are you on mute? Thank you. Sharon?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Perrin?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that is passed as well. All right, well, thank you very much to our applicants and city staff for those alternative compliance requests.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is general public comment. So Haley, I don't know if you want to open that up.
If we have any callers that would like to make public comment, please press *3. Looks like we might have somebody that would like to come in. Let me see if I can do this right. Okay, tap to speak.
Hi, this is Steve Rasmussen. I'm a member of the Tree Protection Task Force. Y'all are our local repository of urban tree canopy policy and expertise, and I'd like to suggest the Commission could play a key role in educating local policymakers about the disastrous unintended consequences for climate change of a bill that's moving through the North Carolina General Assembly right now. It's called SB 349 or HB 401, titled Increase Housing Opportunities. This bill would take away local government's authority to make any decisions affecting single-family residential zoning and force them to allow dense development to be built by right in those zones without any say over traffic, water, sewage, or tree canopy protection or mitigation. It's being supported by Democratic politicians as well as Republicans because it's in line with the kind of tunnel vision push going on nationally to increase the supply of affordable housing under the blunt force economic theory that the only way to do so is to massively increase the supply of all housing so that the magic of the market will make prices fall and become affordable. But this push to build densely at all costs undercuts our other major national priority, which is increasing our forest cover to fight climate change, which the Biden administration also recently announced. So policymakers seem completely unaware of this disconnect right now. As many and maybe all of you know, though, we now have lots of well-studied scientific data that shows that building densely without any tree or green space protections is exactly what has caused the loss of tree canopy that's making our cities dangerously hot and flooded. In other words, without urban forest protections, build means cut. And even if this bill succeeds in reducing historic racial inequities in housing as it intends, its means for achieving that will not only perpetuate historic environmental inequities, but ensure that they follow people wherever they move to. So now on the positive side of this equation, Julie Mayfield has introduced a bill, SB 436, that would allow North Carolina local governments to pass local tree protections without the need for state enabling legislation. And this would be a major step forward in fighting climate change in our state. But I'm afraid the other bill I've just been describing would make that meaningless if it passes. So perhaps you could issue a statement laying out the science I've mentioned and pointing out the major environmental problems this ostensibly well-intentioned increased housing opportunities bill would make far worse for everyone across all income levels. Thank you very much.
Hey, Steve, Cecil here. Thank you for that input. I really appreciate it. We definitely need to do what we can to oppose that bill.
Thank you. Thank you to our caller.
Very good to hear that. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, we actually do have an agenda item to talk about legislative issues coming up that'll be in new business. So we'll move on with our agenda. We do appreciate that, caller. Thank you so much. So for old business, I believe, Sharon, do you have an update on 424 Sunset?
Yes. Talking with Ricky Hurley, Ed Nacy and I are going to meet with the owners. Well, actually, we're not, because they can't make the meeting date. Ed and I are going to walk the property with a plan and offer them suggestions on the remediation, as it was rejected at Board of Adjustments that they be given the increase in their footage for grading. So they declined, Board of Adjustments declined it, and the remediation would be that Ed and I go out, make recommendations of, and then work with the neighbors, which would be, what would be acceptable to holding the soil and replanting what was disturbed. And that'll be in 2 weeks.
Okay. So just to clarify, that project was a grading outside of the issued permit?
That's correct.
And so the remediation is planting to restore soil on steep slope?
That's correct.
Cool. Okay. And so as Sharon mentioned, Sharon and Ed will be UFC representatives to assist the owners on that site with their remediation plan. All right. Any questions from the group or comments on that project?
Would you just repeat the address of the site, please?
424 Sunset. I think
Thank
it's
you.
road or drive. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. And thank you to you both for putting in the time on that site. We appreciate that. All right. Next, an update from the policy working group. So I don't know if Ed, you have something ready for that?
Yeah, we met by phone probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. It was prior to the meeting that we did not have last month. And we discussed a list of priorities to look at, and it turns out our highest priority is to focus on chapter, I should have my notes up, I apologize.
Chapter 20.
I'm sorry, chapter 20, which is badly in need of revision. And we're just waiting for the blessing of this group to proceed, and we'll have subsequent calls. I've already started working my way through chapter 20, at least highlighting things that need to be changed. And that chapter is almost completely obsolete at this point in terms of the names of the Urban Forestry Commission, the department the Urban Forestry Commission works with, the names of department heads, the players that are on the Urban Forestry Commission, questions that have to be answered, like regarding the role of the Metropolitan Sewer District, and on and on and on. Almost every line in chapter, every line and paragraph within that chapter needs some form of revision. So if it's okay with this group, that sort of emerged as our highest priority to focus on this year, and we'll start working on it. Our intention is to propose a complete rewrite of the chapter and present it to the city for their review, and then we can work our way through it from there.
Ed, real quick, sorry, can you remind us as a group what chapter 20 covers, just generally?
Yeah. Chapter 20, the intent is to address trees on public property primarily. So it's got a section on definitions. It talks about the responsibility of the various department heads with respect to trees on public property. It's got the section in it related to historic trees. Section on trimming, pruning, planting, and removal of trees on public property, injuring trees and shrubbery. So it's all with respect to how the community behaves with respect to publicly owned trees along rights of way and in parks. So we think that that's the one section that really needs a lot of work. A second priority is to continue to pursue special tree designation, particularly historic trees and also heritage trees. I know Chris Collins is maintaining what he calls a bug list on the new canopy protection amendment, and heritage trees is one of those items on the bug list. What we all agreed was after a year or so of implementation of that, we're going to take a look at the changes that are needed with that amendment. So that's also a priority, but it's a little bit lower on the list.
You wanted a blessing from the community, from the committee. So bless you, my son. Bless you, my son.
Well, thank you. Maybe that wasn't the right choice of words, but if the Urban Forestry Commission gives this working group the go-ahead, we'll focus our efforts on Chapter 20 for the next couple months.
All right. Do we need to have a vote on that, or I mean, it's just the working group? I'd say do your work, working group. But
yeah,
let
so
me know.
the commission is, and maybe just a nod of heads. If everybody agrees that that's a good priority to focus on, we'll continue our work.
Yeah, I don't think we need a vote. I think when we bring something forward, we would need a vote then.
Is there any other discussion or comments on those priorities?
I'm ordained and I blessed him. So
okay.
Hey.
Well, that's good. It makes me feel extra special this afternoon, Cecil. So we'll convene a meeting in the next week or two, and I think what I'm going to try to do is finish working my way through it, just highlighting areas that I think we need change, because that'll help inform the discussion. And Patrick, Sharon, and Steve and I will get our heads together in the next week or so and continue working forward. All
right, and I'd say even if you have if you're at a working spot where you need the group to get together and discuss, bring us bits and pieces, if needed, because we can, as a group, discuss that in our public meetings, and then the working group can then take the work to the side as well. So
that sounds good.
Appreciate it. That's great. Any questions from the group for the policy portion? All right. So next, some discussion about the tree protection ordinance amendment and training. The last couple months, the city had the two trainings, one for city staff primarily and the other for the development community, and both were really, really great. I know a lot of people from this group were able to attend one or both. So I think, I don't know if it was Nancy or someone else had some updates on that, and then some clarification on what trees fall under the amendment and count in the counts with the different categories of trees in the amendment. I know there's some question about that before. Don't know who was taking that. Was that Chris or Nancy? Did anyone have more information on that?
About what trees count? You're talking about placement on the site, or?
I don't know where the question, I don't know. It didn't come through me. So I know there was a question on, I believe this is what the question was, when an applicant submits their application. So what trees on the site, I think is the question, count toward different pieces of it, like versus street trees versus, was that what it was? Like buffer versus amendment? Yeah.
I think that the complication there lies within, like, we have a lot of landscaping requirements already in 711.3 for building impact landscaping, vehicle use area landscaping, street trees, all the usual stuff. And the premise that the ordinance works off of is that anything that's being preserved existing trees that are being preserved to meet those requirements, right? So if you have existing trees that meet whatever distance and separation and any other requirements to be building impact landscaping, buffer landscaping, vehicle use area, parking lot landscaping, those can count towards your canopy. If you're planting new trees to meet those, they don't count towards that canopy requirement. And the thing with street trees is the trees also are required to exist wholly on the property. So a street tree in theory could count if it was being preserved because it was within the right distance from another street tree and from the travel lane, and it happened to be on the property and not the right of way. But most of the time your street trees are in the right of way, even if you're existing trees, so they're not going to count towards that canopy requirement. So that's a little bit tricky to track, but that's the main message we gave people through the training was usually your street trees aren't going to count because they're usually in the right of way. But in theory, you could have a street tree that exists on the property and meets the dimensional requirements and is being preserved, and then it could count towards your canopy. I think that was pretty much it. We've had some stuff come up lately about easements, and the ordinance really plainly has a list of things that can't exist within that tree canopy protection area. But the real general gist of that is any kind of easement that would allow tree removal would make it so you can't count that as your tree canopy, obviously. And we had that come up recently on a development plan with railroad right away. Some folks were hoping to count trees in the railroad right away, and of course the railroad's going to do what the railroad wants to in that area. So we can't count on those trees being there forever. So we don't count those as canopy.
Okay, good. Did the group have any other questions for Chris while he's here on that, the amendment and ordinance? Go ahead, Patrick.
So, excuse me. Asheville Greenworks through Don and Ed put on 2 seminars. One was around the enforcement of the tree canopy protection ordinance. One seminar was with city staff. The second seminar was with developers and other people related to the development community. So I think at some point we need to have some discussion about how we transition from what particularly the city staff learned from their seminar, and Ed did a fantastic job with that, by the way, into some kind of policy around enforcement of that ordinance. And I think that step is not clear to me, and I think we need some clarification on that.
So I don't know if Chris wants to take it from there, but enforcement, are you talking about like down the line as far as if trees are preserved forever or, or not?
Well, enforcing the regulations in the ordinance so that we make sure that developers are doing exactly what is required by the ordinance.
As part of that training effort, Patrick, I did develop a plan review checklist that I sent to Chris. Not to put you on the spot, Chris, but the whole idea was to welcome the city to use as much of that list or any of that list as practical in your plan review to meet the requirements of the ordinance. We could do a similar checklist that would help identify red flags during building construction, because that's obviously one of the more critical points in protecting trees and land development. And after that, I don't know if the city has any more clarity on recording these trees in perpetuity on the plat and how you might follow up the back end of that. Usually once a project's finished, and at least with protected trees, it's really up to the public to notice whether the trees are gone or still there, or whether they die from construction activities. but having some record is critically important.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sending that over, Ed. We have a rudimentary checklist we developed back in September, right? When the ordinance first rolled out, because we had to tell people how to roll with compliance. But it is on our to-do list to look at that checklist, make some amendments, maybe differentiate between development plans and subdivisions, because we found they have different needs and different designers. And your checklist is going to come in handy when we delve into that, which hopefully will be soon, because we know we need to make some improvements to that checklist. We do also have a standard detail for tree protection that came from the ISA. Am I getting my acronyms right? That is being required to be on all the plans and be followed. So during construction is the easier part. We do have our construction inspectors who make periodic visits, routine repeating inspections to active development sites. And what's been added to their list is to check for tree protection and make sure it's in place where it needs to be. It's kind of like I think you just mentioned, after construction, after CO, for the life of those trees, if we're being completely honest, we have 2 zoning enforcement positions for the entire city. So we do rely, by necessity, we rely on folks to report violations. We're not going to be able to catch them all. Those folks are shared between trees and short-term rentals and signs and junked vehicles and illegal uses and whatever else comes along. So that's just kind of the reality of that enforcement situation right now. It's tough to get it. If they do see something, if something comes to their attention, they're on it. But it will be like that. You are all familiar that the ordinance does require the tree protection plan to be recorded. We do require that, so it is in the chain of title there. So anyone doing due diligence on a property should come across this and should see that those trees are protected. So that's kind of my summary to that of where we are right now.
All right, thanks, Chris. So I think this is something that we'll continue to revisit, probably every meeting for the next year at least, and build up this list of these key points that we need to keep an eye on and address and potentially add to and revise as we go. So construction enforcement and enforcement of the record of preserved trees would be on that list. So any other questions around the ordinance or issues that we're going to keep an eye on?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Chris and Ed for their explanations.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you both. All right. Good. So next, the budget request for this fiscal year has obviously been put through to council. We've talked about that. So on the agenda now is, did we want to, as a group, as the Urban Forestry Commission, put through any education, push to council members on our request, specifically for the urban forester and the urban forest master plan? What I'm seeing right now as we talk about this enforcement of the ordinance and watching these trees over time, an urban forester would just make all of this much nicer, someone to oversee the processes, to work with this group and council as that go-between. So I would really love to push for that position to be filled. But as a group, we currently have those 2 requests on the table. So I'm going to open it up for discussion on how we want to proceed. If there's any comments or what we want to do to get these points through to council. Whoever's first. Go ahead, Patrick.
So obviously, through the Urban Forestry Commission and particularly the Tree Protection Task Force, we made a major push, I believe, for the 2020 budget for funding for an urban forester and an urban forest master plan. And we had meetings, we submitted a lot of documents and scientific data to support our position. unfortunately, I think there's only 2 council members left on the council from that time when we did all that work. So I think we need to push that same, make that same kind of effort, push those same kind of documents and scientific support for funding these 2 positions to the new council. Because I'm not sure whether the new council members have ever seen that.
Yeah, that was my thought as well, is we have just a couple of people who had been there for that previous push. So, Perrin, go ahead.
Thank you, Amy. I just wanted to ask Kim to give us, our council person, Roni, who's our council liaison, to give us sort of a readout of the mood and psychology on council about the budget right now. I understand we have a bit of a budget surplus relative to what we expected for the forthcoming year. And so would you just kind of give us the lay of the land, Kim?
Sure. Well, I will speak to, we are in the 11th hour of this budget process. So any requests or recommendations that you would make, I would certainly make them today. And as far as the mood, I can only speak for myself, but I understand the need for us to repair our tree canopy, and I'm happily willing to carry forward any recommendation this group would make. Our next budget work session is on May 11th.
Are you seeing that surplus is sort of already spoken for in a sense by other initiatives that council's already getting on board with, or what's the status with the budget surplus specifically?
So in the last budget work session that we had, I guess that would have been a week and a half ago, we've been having a conversation about the council's new top 4 stated goals, which are reparations, and equitable recovery using our ARP COVID relief spending, the compensation study. I'm losing that 4th one. You would have thought that I could have figured that out pretty fast. There's only 4. But I know that the wage and compensation study is going to be a top priority. There are 2 options on the table. And so the tree canopy has not been mentioned as a top priority.
Yeah, regarding the fact that we, the resolution passed last year unanimously by council, even though this is a partly new council, and we've had a long-term push for this. So I think we should renew our efforts. I agree with that. At least to remind council that this is a citizen-driven initiative over several years, and the resolution passed, and we're just the spokespeople for it, and that there's a lot of support out there for it, and whether they articulate it exactly like in a scientific way or not, that support is there. So
here.
I just think we should have a strong reminder and push however we can.
I do have an update. The 4th was reimagining public safety. So I am abundantly aware, thanks to Steve's sit and chat before the pandemic, of the request. But I do recommend that it is within the scope of this commission to advise the full council.
Just for clarification, is that request have we made that budget request, or are we still talking about whether or not we should make that request?
No, if you recall, according to Ben Woody, all requests from last year were automatically put through. So that request that we had on the table was the Urban Forest Master Plan and the Urban Forester. So those are the requests on the table from this commission through DSD.
Okay. Thank you.
So it sounds like, what we did before, if I recall, this would have been 2020 when we made that last big push on this, or 2019, pardon me, was we did phone calls to all of the council members put out the phone list and some talking points. So I would suggest we do that again, unless there's other ideas. We could write a formal, write something up, but we'd have to vote on it now, and I don't think we have time for that. So, so I saw a couple hands up. Sharon?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Do we have a few people that'll volunteer to do that and concentrate, that have some time to do it? I can't volunteer for one more thing, but I think it needs to be done. We did it big time before, and we just don't have time to do that now, but we need to do something, according to Kim, yesterday. So that means we've got to coalesce in a hurry, and if there's some committed people that can do that in the next 3-4 days, that'd be great.
The Tree Protection Task Force was extremely effective.
Yes.
I mean, if it's just the Urban Forestry Commission, it needs to be a broader thing, because we speak through Kim and to the and to council in general, but I think it needs to get across that it's a broader appeal and a broader support.
Yeah, do we have time to coalesce those people? I'm not involved in that. Like I said, I'm maxed out commitment wise, but do we have those people available within the next few days to do this, as opposed to the next meeting and the next conversation?
I think they have a strong network through the community groups. If we, reach out and get them initiated with some talking points, I think that could happen quickly.
I think
there will be communication amongst the Tree Protection Task Force within the next day.
Yeah.
Do we have any talking points from last year or the year before that we can pull out and reference real quickly?
I know that I have some of it. I've saved everything, so I just have to go through and find it, which shouldn't be hard.
I think we should start with the resolution that passed.
Yeah.
And then,
well, anything in terms of talking points that will support the budget, if anybody has any of that, if you can send it to Dawn and to me as quickly as you can, we could probably start. We can start drumming up some support pretty quickly. I'm going to be tied up all day tomorrow in a deposition, so it's kind of like they'll have to wait till Thursday before I can do anything. But if you guys can get talking points to us, I know I could at least get a couple of email messages out to get things started.
So I have all that information from the last time. I can round it up and send it to you, Ed, and you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Great. And Dawn, I saw you had a hand up earlier. Did you have anything else to add?
Last year, Greenworks led the charge and emailed out to our lists and networks and did a strong push. We're operating at less than full capacity right now, so I'm hesitant to jump and take the lead on this, but I will, especially if I have some support from others on the Tree Protection Task Force.
Well, we appreciate that, of course. Kim, is that a new?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would add is that a number of the things that previous councils have prioritized in the past were discussed as now being operationalized. So it may be worthwhile to acknowledge that the climate emergency has been passed, and then is the funding available to advance the work.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
But I have one more question for you, Kim. Would City Council prefer to hear by way of phone messages, phone calls, or emails, or both?
I mean, I would say whatever is the most accessible to the person sending the information. Okay. What I will do is my normal report back to council from this meeting, and I will copy the chair so that the chair can distribute it to this group.
Patrick, can you copy Kim those talking points when you send them to Dawn and I, so that she has them in her hand for her briefing to council?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't know whether, Kim, you have a copy of the resolution. We need to make sure. But obviously, you probably have that, Patrick, to the resolution, don't you?
Yes, I have that.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's move ahead. I mean, we got to keep pushing.
Yeah, it can feel like we keep spinning our wheels, but we're talking to a new crowd. So let's get it pushed through as much as we can and see if we can get something accomplished. And I know that Greenworks was starting the work on preliminary work on Urban Forest Master Plan, which is an ongoing process. It's a long process, even if it were to be funded immediately. It's a long thing. So I know you guys are starting or had talked about starting some of the community input pieces of that. So we'll at least get going with what we can on that piece. All right, any
Amy,
other
if I
discussion?
may, if this group is wanting to make a fresh recommendation for this budget, the group may wish to actually make a vote of recommendation.
That's true. I guess we don't, we could just verbalize it if that's something we want to do right now.
I make a motion that we recommend that City Council funds an urban forester position and an urban forestry master plan.
I second.
May I offer a friendly amendment, Ed, that the exactly what you said, but also in keeping with our prior request from last year and the request that was submitted this year for the budget?
That's fine. That's fine. And in keeping with the zero net loss canopy resolution.
Okay. So we have all that. Do you want to restate it?
Did you get it, Harry? No. I make a recommendation that, I make a motion that we recommend to City Council that they fund an urban forester and an urban forestry master plan as recommended in the previous 2 budget years and in keeping with City Council's resolution to achieve zero net loss tree canopy.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. So Patrick?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Sharon?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Cecil?
Aye.
Perrin?
Aye.
Dawn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you very much. And so now that's on the record, so we can get that to council on your update. I appreciate that, Kim. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will get started with the talking points, and as a group here and as citizens, we can make that push and then work with our community partners to make that push as well. Very good. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda is the city-county collaboration. And, since this group is the Urban Forestry Commission to the Asheville City Council, we don't have a formal role in the county, but I did want to point out that the Buncombe County is soliciting input and members to work on the revision of their comp plan right now. So again, as citizens who live in Buncombe County, we are welcome to have input and potentially work with that group. So I'd encourage anyone who might have time and interest to apply to work on their steering committee. I believe they have applications open now for that committee to work on the comp plan through the county. So again, that's something that as the Urban Forestry Commission, we can look for opportunities like with the Haw Creek Elementary School project, where there was that inherent overlap where the city and the county were co-involved. That's a place where we can consult and have opportunity to make those connections. Otherwise, we really need to work within the community groups that we already have in place and try to forge other connections that way. But I'll open it up if anybody else has comments or suggestions on continuing that collaboration.
Just a request to rename the group that you mentioned, Amy. What was the name again?
For the county?
Yeah, that you were saying.
So the county is revising their comprehensive plan, and they have applications open now for people to join. I believe I don't know what exactly they have it called, the steering committee or revision committee. That's through the county. But again, just an encouragement for anyone who's interested here to possibly look into that. to have that crossover. All right. Good. So working group updates. Is there an update from the open space amendment working group? Did you guys have any other meetings?
Yes, we've continued our meetings. They've become bi-weekly. I think we were doing them every 3 weeks, but now it's every 2 weeks. So the pace has picked up, both in the periodicity of the meetings, but also in the sort of density of the work that we're doing. And so we're much more down into the brass tacks of the specifics of how the open space amendment would ultimately be crafted. And we've gotten to the point where we're disagreeing about some big picture things. Right now, we're hashing out whether or not downtown, the central business district, and the River Arts district would be included in open space requirements. And so that's kind of the big controversy at the moment, disagreement among the members of the task force at the moment. And we're working hard on it. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of planning and strategizing and thinking and hashing it out. And that's what we're doing. And it's been time consuming, but I'm hopeful that we will get some substantial improvements out of the process. And that's the spirit that we're participating in to the best of our ability. And so that's kind of my general summary. It's very much a work in progress. We don't really have a sense of how long it will ultimately take, but we are into the sort of blow by blow brass tacks of the details of crafting the final form of that amendment. So that's where we're at right now.
All right. Thank you for the update. And thank you to you and everyone else who's been working on that. It is, I'm sure, time consuming, but hopefully worth it. Really appreciate your time on that. All right. If there's any questions for Perrin. No. So the mission statement. So I've been trying to amend it based on the feedback that we received at our last meeting, adding a little bit more about the human and social dimensions of trees and the environmental equity of tree canopy. And I'm personally a little stuck on revisions, that we could make it much longer, and write a whole paper on how to, achieve these goals and what we want to put in there. So at this point, I'm opening it back up for suggestions on revisions. Hopefully everybody has the document. I can resend it out. Otherwise, at some point, we'll just need to make a vote on if we agree that the mission statement is how we want it to look. And then the next step will be integrating it with the group and with the city. And I was talking to Nancy about some ways that can happen. It may not necessarily go into the UDO as something written in, into the ordinances. It might be something that we keep as part of the tree commission and all of the work that we do, the Urban Forestry Commission, potentially just on the website or in other places like that, where the commission has a public face. But that way it would be more easily revised in the future. It could be, a little easier to access by the public if it weren't only in the UDO. But we can talk about those next steps once we have the final draft available. So are there any comments or other suggestions on wording for the draft of the mission statement?
I've got a couple. I too struggled with how we can address equity in the statement. And I just thought where the statement says, I'm going to be very specific here just for a second. Improving human health, maybe add improved human health and social condition, might address that point. I'll leave that up to you. My second point is the mission statement itself. Our mission is to protect and enhance the urban forests of the city of Asheville through education, collaboration, and policy initiatives. I would change that to read through education, best management practices, collaboration, and policy initiatives, emphasizing best management practices. So I think with those two changes, it pretty well meets my satisfaction. And notwithstanding tweaks that other folks in the group might want to make.
Okay, I like those suggestions. Any other comments? Go ahead, Dawn.
I haven't had a chance to really look at it and make comment, and I will. I'm just looking through it now. But with regards to equity, I think we need to be explicit about calling out what we're talking about in the framing paragraph and what we mean by how we're addressing it. So I can help make some edit suggestions in this week.
Like adding the word inclusion or something, along with collaboration and best management practices and things like that.
Well, in the mission statement, I think we should have something there, but I think we have an opportunity in the above paragraph to really explain more and highlight it so it's elevated beyond just a list of things we're checking off as like, okay, we're going to do health and equity and stormwater and those sorts of things. So I think it's can be woven into all we do and should be. But yeah, I'll help make some changes.
Awesome. Well, for me, I would just appreciate it. My faculty advisor is an editor, so I am all about cutting everything out. So I do need help to add things in. So
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a real art getting things concise enough and also explaining them well enough. And I think it's reasonably close, but it can use some wordsmithing for sure.
That would be great. So if it's okay, then what we can do is everybody has a copy of this. If you need it, again, I can send it out, but make edits and suggestions and send them through. And then we'll try to get to a revised draft for the group to vote on next month, if that works.
Yeah, and Amy, I'm also a part of the mission statement working group, so I just wanted to say I think we favor edits over suggestions at this point because we've sort of reached our word saturation limit with the construct that we built.
Yes.
So it is hard to think about how to insert new concepts into it, and so that's why, Don, your offer to make edits is so valuable because that will sort of, you can bring a fresh perspective to it, which will really help.
Right.
Yes, agreed. It really does.
Shorter is always better.
Yeah.
Yep. Concise language is what we're going to go for. So, yeah. But like Perrin said, when the three of us, Steve and Perrin and I put it together, you get to a saturation level in your mind where you can't see it beyond. So we do appreciate those edits within the document. So good. All right. Well, thanks everybody on that. So Sharon, any updates from TRC?
No, but we should be looking for somebody to replace me in 2 years. It's going to take 2 years to comprehend it. So if we can find somebody that's on longer than I am, I think I've got like 2.5 years left. Patrick has been a great help. I took some time off and he sits in, and it's very helpful to have someone to back up what's going on. And once again, staff has been more than helpful in answering all of my questions. And as you all know, I have a lot of them. So I'm suggesting that someone that comes on after someone leaves, that we kind of look to see how committed they would be to wanting to take on something like TRC, as opposed to waiting to the last minute that I leave. And then it's that learning curve that's taken so long.
Sharon, you're not off the hook until the city hires an urban forester to do TRC for us.
God, I must be so happy to see that. Not to do TRC would be my dream come true. So.
Well, at the same time, we appreciate your expertise there.
Well,
absolutely, yes.
It's really helped us coalesce to understand it. I mean, I really think all the work that we've done, and I think we're just a great commission right now with understanding everything, how the city functions, more than we did when I started, when we're all trying to figure out where the bodies are buried, So now we've got a good idea where to go when we have an issue and what it looks like, and if not, where to research it, which is when we when I started is way more than we did. So I want to congratulate all of us for just working our butts off to be a great commission. I'm just really proud to be on this commission. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right. And Sharon and I will work on, I promise that this summer I'll free up some time to look into that process and see how we can try to streamline that and get someone, like you said, a second string ready for when we need them. Okay, great. Then we're going to move on to new business. And so first we'd like to introduce Gina Smith with the Asheville-Buncombe Food Policy Council. So Gina, if you want to tell us a little bit about the group and what you do.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I'm the interim coordinator for the council. And we do a lot of things. Right now, some of the main things we're working on are we're trying to create emergency food preparedness plans with 4 neighborhoods in Asheville: Shiloh, Southside, Haw Creek, and East End. And so we're working with residents in those neighborhoods to come up with a neighborhood template that we can use for each of them and for plans. And we're also, we've created an informative flyer to distribute to the neighborhoods, talking about with resources that are available in an emergency situation. We're also working on convening a committee of residents right now to decide a process for determining reparations recommendations for the city of Asheville. This is a huge project on a long timeline, but we are hoping to come up with that process for determining those recommendations within the next couple of months. And specifically, this committee is looking at food-related harms that were caused to communities by urban renewal policies. And we're also working with the city on considering some updates to the Asheville Edibles map, which it's a GIS platform, which many of you are probably familiar with, but we're looking at adding community gardens. We're looking at the crowdsourced nature of the map and seeing ways we can maybe streamline it and make it work better for folks. And then our plan is hopefully to make some changes and then relaunch it and promote that launch to the community. So, and my presence here at the meetings is mainly to look for areas of collaboration. So potential areas.
Well, that was going to be my question for you,
Yeah,
Gina. How
yeah.
do you think that the Urban Forestry Commission can assist with what you guys are working on?
Yeah, well, I'm mainly looking for potential opportunities to do edible plantings. Like I've met with Dawn to talk about the possibility of planting edibles in the Haw Creek community, in any way that the council can support that kind of thing. I would love to meet with you and talk about it.
Okay, Sharon, go ahead.
Hey Gina, is this a city, a new city function, or who are you and where do you sit in the order of things?
Yeah, good question. So the council, we're actually under the umbrella of Bountiful Cities. Bountiful Cities is our fiscal agent, and we work under that umbrella to work with the city. We do have a contract every year with the city of Asheville with specific deliverables related to food. Does that answer your question?
Basically, you're an independent contractor that's contracted through the city to help in these areas.
Correct.
And you're contracting, because I do know I'm on Easton Valley Neighborhood Association, and so I help with our Stevens Leap vegetable garden over there.
Oh, yeah.
So that's Bountiful Cities also is doing a lot of that. So that's how you're tied in, is with those people there as well, right? You're all one and the same.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of crossover for sure. Yeah, but Bountiful Cities acts as our fiscal agent, as a 501c3.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Perrin?
Well, hi, Gina. Thanks for coming to talk to us about your initiative. It does sound like there's some areas of overlap between your focus and yours. And so we've been talking about a little bit about reparations initiative as it relates to Urban Canopy. And so, and urban renewal. And of course, a big area of intersection there is the loss of urban canopy in the poorest neighborhoods in the city, and the health impacts that's had on people as the heat island effect has gotten worse and worse and worse as gentrification accelerates. Moving past urban renewal to gentrification in the present day, it's continuing to happen, as is the over policing problem intersecting with the loss of tree canopy in the poorest neighborhoods in Asheville, further exacerbating that problem. So I think when you talk about fashioning reparations recommendations, when you talk about edible landscaping, and you're talking to the Urban Forestry Commission at the same time, I'm thinking about fruit trees. Perhaps, maybe that's one sort of interim step to start creating more shade, more food availability in those neighborhoods. Perhaps there could be funding freed up through the city, through the reparations initiative, that could go towards some of this edible shading, edible landscaping that could be happening in those neighborhoods. And Dawn, I definitely like to hear what you think about that, because I know you've been my partner, my primary partner in that conversation. So.
So we have, Greenworks has partnered with the Housing Authority for the most part to install community orchards through a project we call it Food Tree Project. And having fruit-bearing trees, like service berries that don't require a lot of work, or mulberries, but aren't like a very popular fruit-bearing or fruit that people eat. Those are more manageable. We have a lot of apples, which take a lot of maintenance and attention in order to have a good yield. So we run up against a capacity issue. I see apples as kind of this gateway fruit, because once you get apples into an orchard, you can introduce other fruits and gradually get people exploring different ones. But the other trees are not as popular for neighborhoods as apples are. Another thing is that the fruit trees don't tend to be shade trees. They're small in stature, so they don't provide the shading for sitting under, or shading a house or a building to any great degree as a taller, mature tree would. So those are some of the questions. We work with schools as well, and we have worked with Shiloh in getting fruit trees there, and also shade trees. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. It's a high intensity effort to work on orchards or fruit trees.
Thank you.
So maybe we could get on board with some lower maintenance fruit trees, making more sense at a sort of systems level in terms of the follow-up and maintenance that's required. But Gina, maybe a way that we could collaborate and put our energies together might be in advocating for sort of a combination approach of edible fruit trees and shade trees being sort of installed together across the city in some of these neighborhoods, and that would sort of combine our missions together. And then we could push together for the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great.
A good place to plant edible fruit trees is underneath power lines where we can't grow shade trees. So it's just something to think about.
But I will say that the city does have a lot of service berries planted throughout the city on city property that people, you'll see them out the first week of June collecting with buckets, collecting service berries. So, yeah, so those are accessible, and there are already a lot of them throughout town.
Go ahead, Mark. Did you have something to add?
Oh, no, that all sounds pretty much the way it actually is, yes. The service berry harvesters, I see them every year when they come out, usually a mom and a small child or something. So, you know, as long as we can keep as many of the edibles in sort of a centralized location where somebody can go to and not be standing right next to the road when they're gathering, that's totally ideal. Those situations seem to have worked the best in parks and so forth.
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Gina. And keep us in mind. You know, we're here to help each other. If you think of ways that we can work together, or if you need any help or you know, consultation from this group, we're happy to do that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Perrin, if you're interested in attending our next meeting of this committee, the Reparations Recommendations Committee, I can include you in those communications.
He just put his email in the chat. I don't know if you can access it. There.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. Okay, good. All right. So next on the agenda is a brief legislation discussion. Patrick was going to talk to us about some of the upcoming legislation, I believe, in the state legislature.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So everyone heard Steve Rasmussen's statement toward the beginning of the meeting. So I just will amplify a bit on what he said. We have in the General Assembly Senate Bill 349 and House Bill 401, which are companion bills that were introduced in this session of the General Assembly. Most of the bill was written by the North Carolina Home Builders Association. And the bottom line effect of the bills would prohibit municipalities or local governments in general from enforcing single-family zone requirements. So the stated purpose of the bills is to increase the housing stock throughout the state, and particularly, although it's not stated or defined, affordable housing stock throughout the state. The bills also would on a lot that's zoned single family, a developer could build a duplex, triplex, multiplex, or townhouses, and there would be nothing that the city could do about that, even though currently that would violate the single family zoning districts. So in addition, the bills would allow the construction on existing single family lots with single family homes, accessory use structures, and local governments would be prohibited from enforcing any restrictions on accessory use structures such as parking or any other standards related to water, sewage, etc. So the reason that I think it's important for the Urban Forestry Commission to discuss these two bills is that, as Steve said, when you start building denser developments, housing developments on single family lots, one of the things is going to suffer are existing trees. And, if everyone remembers the NASA development Heat Island study, it showed that single family communities have the highest density of tree canopy. So the effect of this bill, if it were passed, would be the loss of trees, a loss of that tree canopy, and the overall effect it would have not only on those communities, but the city. A lot of the discussion has been around affordable housing. And I think we all understand and support the need for affordable housing. However, this is really a draconian measure to address the affordable housing needs. Plus, it should really be left up to local governments to decide how it wants to deal with making provisions, policies, ordinances to increase the housing stock generally, or increase affordable housing specifically. And also for local governments to then weigh the balance of that against, for our focus, against the loss of trees and tree canopy. So with that, I'll open it up for any comments or discussion that the rest of the members would like to make.
I haven't read the legislation, but what it comes across to me as a kind of a single-minded approach to density. Density has its place, and density is needed in cities in certain places. But we got to walk and chew gum at the same time. We need to improve and enhance our green infrastructure at the same time as increasing the housing stock without resorting to urban sprawl. So it's a much more complicated issue than comes across in this bill to me, from the way it's described. And for that reason, I think it's a problem. It kind of opens the door to just densifying everything rather than looking at a more planned approach that's adaptable to certain communities. So I think some of the intention is probably well-meaning. I just don't think it addresses the problem as a whole, the way you describe it, Patrick. But I haven't read the legislation, but it seems like we've got to do more than one thing at a time. So our green infrastructure is just as important as the density. So if we're going to rebuild the country's infrastructure, we've got to rebuild the green infrastructure as well.
Right. Thanks, Steve. Did anyone else have comments on the issue?
I would like to see the bill that Julie Mayfield has introduced. I think that would be interesting to see. And I do know that the North Carolina Urban Forest Council has been making efforts to fight the bill as well. So we'll see where they can go with that.
Mm-hmm.
It strikes me as a very anti-conservative piece of legislation. It's sort of along the lines of corporate welfare. It's anti-local control, so it's sort of radically anti-conservative, and that seems like an effective line of attack against it, that they're trying to take away local control from local communities and have this top-down, one-size-fits-all prescription, which ultimately, of course, would profit developers more across the board. The only problem is the quality of life for everybody in every community across the state. So I think, attacking so-called conservative initiatives for being fundamentally anti-conservative is a pretty productive and salient line of attack for these kinds of Trojan horses. So I would just, Patrick, I don't know if you're involved in sort of making a position statement about it or what have you.
Yeah, so the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods has taken a position on these two bills, which I wrote, and we sent our position and the letter to each member of the city council, along with the mayor, the city manager, and the city attorney. We sent those same correspondence to our local state representatives in Raleigh, as well as to the governor. So I can easily adopt a statement that that the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods came up with. I will also state the status of the bill. I had some email exchanges from Julie Mayfield, who at one point said that every bill introduced into the General Assembly first goes into a Rules Committee. And then it comes out of that Rules Committee primarily if there's consensus among the Republican caucus and the legislature, because they control it. And then it goes into the relative committee for hearings, for a vote, and then onto the floor of the respective chamber. So initially, Julie had said that she had some discussions and that the bill looked like it was going to languish in the Rules Committee because there was not consensus among the GOP caucus for moving the bill out. However, I discovered several days ago that the bill has been moved out and has been referred to the Senate Finance Committee. And I alerted Julie about that, and she was quite alarmed because she was convinced that it wasn't going to go anywhere. So obviously, the Republican caucus has reached some kind of consensus, and the bill is now moving through the committee and chamber approval process. So
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut off you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I think that time is of an essence here, and I would like to propose that the Urban Forestry Commission write a letter opposing Senate Bill 349 and House Bill 401, and I can come up with the specific language on that and have that sent to our local legislative representatives in Raleigh, as well as to Governor Cooper.
Before we get too far with that, sorry, I want to get clarification that that's an appropriate step for this group being advisory to our city council. Obviously we're citizens of our state as well, and we can take action as private citizens through groups like the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods. That's the group that is a community group and not a city council commission. So I don't know if there's city staff here that can advise us. I don't know if it's appropriate for this group to write a letter for or against a statewide bill. So we get some clarification there.
I would have the same question. However, the city has taken an approach, I believe is still on this track, of an urban centers approach to increasing density in urban centers, which makes a lot more sense to me, even though there are details of that need to be worked out. So it would fly counter to our whole planning initiative, Asheville. So,
of course, and we can advise City Council on those issues.
Yeah, Kim might give us an idea too, and I think, I'm not sure. I think the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods is probably where the letter should come from. Maybe we support it somehow, if that's appropriate.
Well, and our other community groups, such as the Tree Protection Task Force and other, the Sierra Club, other groups can certainly have a say in this. And again, any of us as citizens can make our voice known as well.
This is Kim. Amy, I think that you're on track there, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to advise council to take a position and to offer your own personal suggestions as residents and neighbors.
Maybe maybe we submit something to council, an opinion to council. Maybe that would be an approach.
Do we know the timeline on this? Do we have time to do something in writing for next meeting, or do we need to work on this now for time-wise?
Well, I don't know. I mean, once hearings are scheduled and a committee takes a vote, things move pretty rapidly through the legislature. Now, that's not to say that it may be held up with amendments that will come through. So it really is a crapshoot in terms of exactly how much time we have on this.
Yeah, everything that's been said makes sense to me. I think our only option is really to urge City Council to chime in about the bill sort of on our behalf. But yeah, to the extent that, and maybe we can vote on a resolution to encourage City Council to do exactly that while we're in this meeting today. I also, though, want to encourage you, Patrick, because you're already plugged in through CAN on this issue, to harp on the phrase local control as much as you can. The pro-development Democrats in the legislature who are already on board are probably just going to be on board regardless at this point. But you want to stoke division within the Republican caucus on this. And the way you do it is through the phrase local control. So that's my advice.
Well, that was the central point of CAN's statement that we sent to City Council and to our local state representatives. So with all that discussion, I will make a motion that the Urban Forestry Commission send a resolution to the City Council with copies to the city manager and the city attorney, asking them to oppose Senate Bill 349 and House Bill 401. And I'll be glad to write the resolution.
Does it have to be a resolution or just a recommendation?
Whatever the commission members think is appropriate.
Well, Patrick, my concern is that we might not have time to write something and vote on it later, because this could just, this is the type of thing they'll try to sneak through in the middle of the night on a vote. So I think if we can just vote on it now and get it in the minutes, perhaps we could send a letter to City Council to reinforce the message. If you could draft that might be the most efficient, time-efficient way to deal with this.
Right. So what we do then is vote that we are making a recommendation to City Council to oppose the proposed legislation.
Yeah. So Patrick, if you just want to slightly amend what you started there to be a recommendation, then we can vote on it now.
Okay. So I move that the Urban Forestry Commission recommend to the Asheville City Council that it opposes the enactment of Senate Bill 349 and House Bill 401.
Second.
I have a question.
Yes.
Patrick, does your work with Ken in the letter state why you're why is does it go into reasons? In other words, the idea that this is going to cause problems with green infrastructure and that sort of thing, I think needs to be brought forward. That
Steve, I'm going to stop you there because we're not voting on that letter.
Okay, I know, but I'm
that's just going to be a
asking,
separate issue that Ken is working
I
on.
agree, but it's relevant to the sense that what are we recommending to city?
We're recommending that the city council works in whatever capacity they have to oppose these bills.
But we are not giving. Are we giving a reason for not for not?
We can amend the recommendation to include more language at this point if we'd like.
Well, I thought that Perrin's suggestion is that we vote on a motion suggesting to the city council that they use whatever means possible to oppose these two bills, and then we would write a letter.
Right.
To
we
the
just
city
can't
council.
vote on that without
Right.
seeing it at this point.
Okay.
And that way I can I'll be glad to talk with Steve on some language on that. The CAN statement did not get into green infrastructure. We focused mostly on local control.
Okay.
And the fact that in terms of increasing housing stock and affordable housing, that's best left to local governments to decide based on their specific conditions on the ground.
Okay.
But I'll be glad to incorporate whatever
I think
you would suggest, Steve.
I think we should incorporate. I think this adequate now just to oppose it, but I think at some point we need to follow up and say why.
Yeah, and again, that'll just have to be separate because of our constraint.
Right,
with this.
Because we're the Urban Forestry Commission, we're not the Planning Commission.
Right. Right. And I think we've discussed the why and how it applies to our work.
Okay.
So.
Just clarification.
Are we good? Okay. Well, then we have a motion and a second, so we'll take a vote. So, Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Cecil. See with us.
There's Cecil.
Aye.
Thank you. Perrin.
Aye.
Dawn.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So that motion for the resolution passes. So we'll pass that along through City Council. Thanks, Kim, for your input on that as well.
One last thought on this thing is that it's probably not veto proof, so the governor may be key in future communications on this whole thing.
Right.
It's a good point. And I think Patrick mentioned that they sent it through what CAN had done already. And so, Patrick, we're welcome to write something up and bring it to this group for our next meeting as far as a written statement. We would just need to see it to be able to vote on it, and have it in the minutes and see if it's still relevant, if there's been any action.
Okay. I also, I think that both Steve Rasmussen and Ed mentioned Senate Bill 436, which was introduced by Senator Julie Mayfield and Senator Mike Woodard of Raleigh. This bill would allow municipalities and counties to enact tree protection ordinances without requiring the local authority approval of the General Assembly. So I don't know if the members want to have any discussion on that, or we just keep an eye on it.
I'd be happy to, this is Cecil, I'd be happy to draft a letter on behalf of our commission in support of that bill, which then to circulate among all of you.
And again, our support as this group needs to be through council. So just make sure that whatever wording or phrasing is as the commission informing council. And again, as private citizens, we can make our stand directly to the state as needed as well.
Okay, well, I would be happy to frame something for us to send to council if that's helpful.
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yes, good.
Okay. Any other discussion on those bills or state issues? Again, I just want to be careful again that our jurisdiction, our role is to inform Asheville City Council, which has a role in state issues as well, but we just want to make sure we're in our bounds more or less. So
no, we rule. We totally rule.
And we can get out of bounds and get our hands slapped, but we'll carefully get out of bounds as needed. So last thing on our new business item here is a brief discussion, just an overview of the Urban Place UDO amendment. This is something that I believe is upcoming through council. So Patrick, I think you had a little information on that one.
Yeah, so the city has come up with a proposed urban space form district ordinance. And that ordinance is about to go through the various stages of approval in the city. They've been developing this for at least a couple years. And I believe, let me back up. So I know the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods has entered in some recent discussions with the City Department of Planning about the language. Two pieces of this proposed ordinance that would affect what we do on the Urban Forestry Commission is that it would exempt building impact trees from that provision. It would also allow, under certain circumstances, the reduction of buffers, which it would include trees. And so I just bring this up to the as an FYI to the Urban Forestry Commission. The Urban Place, proposals would be zoning changes. In phase one of this, there are 3 areas, one on Merriman Avenue, where the fresh market is, one on Tunnel Road near the Office Depot, and one on Bleachery Boulevard near the Walmarts. And these are mixed use developments, generally on sites that are already zoned commercial or industrial. And they would provide for both retail and residential components of these projects. And it's in response to, I think, an initiative through the comprehensive plan of planning for higher density developments along major transportation routes that would make it easier for residents of these developments to get to places of employment. But these two, the exemption of tree canopy, building impact trees, and the reduction of buffers is a concern, particularly since, every tree possible that we could get on these projects would help, again, mitigate the heat island effect and provide an overall better environment for not only the residents who would live there, but also for people who would be frequenting the retail stores that would be part of this project. So I don't know if anyone on the commission wants to speak to any of that or not.
The general approach of the urban centers, I think, is not a bad thing. It's densifying in certain areas. It's very low tree canopy cover there now in most of those spots. It is a concern how it's written and how we get a canopy coverage there. I think Ed and I worked on it a little bit with the city, and just as a general idea, something like a minimum 25% canopy cover for those areas, which would be a huge increase from what's there now. But I think we can improve it more than that. I think we need to be involved in it, certainly.
Yeah, when you and Ed had those discussions, I think it was probably with Vidilla, we didn't have the tree canopy preservation ordinance.
Right.
So we've been told that the tree canopy preservation ordinance would apply to these projects. So unless someone from the city has different information.
Sharon, go ahead.
Yeah, the current tree canopy protection ordinance allows for using building impact trees as credit. So if we have an area of established trees and building impact trees are required, they can use what's existing towards their building impact trees now. So the response from the city on urban centers, or urban place is the correct name, is that, well, they're going to allow for the tree canopy protection ordinance amendment. And so therefore building impact trees are part of how it's applied anyway for 711.3. So what my suggestion is, and I think Patrick's as well, is that there are hardly any, as Steve said, there's hardly any trees in these areas anyway. So they'll have to do a fee in lieu to meet the requirement. And then we would like to see building impact trees be part of the requirement. But as it stands now, if you have existing trees in 719.1, then you can use those existing trees as credit for building impact. So there's some crossover stuff with this. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Any other discussion? And then question to the group, is there anything we want to try to do? It sounds like this might be pretty far along though.
Well, I think we need to put this into a working group. One of our existing working groups, perhaps. I don't know whether it fits in open space or not, but.
At this point, the ordinance language is scheduled to go to the council, to the P&E committee. I believe it's next week, and then to the planning and zoning in June. And then I think to the city council for a public hearing in July, and either a vote in the city council in July or August. That's the timetable as it stands right now.
And this is phase one. We don't know if we have phase two, but this is just for phase one, which is the 3 areas that Patrick talked about already.
Is there a way that we could see a copy of the language? Maybe the policy committee should review it and look for tragic flaws.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can send that language to you, and I can also, we've been working on some changes to that language, and whether or not there's time for, we've requested another meeting with planning to discuss those. Whether or not there's time for that, I guess we'll see. But I can send all that to the policy working group.
That sounds great, Patrick. Thanks. And we'll make a point of putting that on our agenda next time we speak in a week or so. Do we have time to speak in say 2 weeks about this?
Yes.
Well, either way, if it hasn't gone for final vote, what you can pitch, if you can get a meeting, ideally with whoever's working on this with city staff, would be basically you're representing community voices that are going to come up when they have public input anyway. So getting some of these ideas in now will ideally help alleviate community concerns over this issue in the future. So that's what I would pitch to city staff as far as getting some of these ideas and issues in on, before it gets too far.
I agree.
Okay, so if the policy working group is good with that, I think that'd be the perfect place for it to go for now. And then if we need to do something more formal as far as resolutions or what have you down the line, we can as a group.
Okay.
Good. All right, thank you. Thanks, Patrick, for all those updates. That's great.
Thanks, Patrick.
All right, so last on the agenda are the updates in the agenda and minutes from all of our other groups. So if anyone here who submitted an update has anything they want to add or say about them, we can read through them, but they're there.
Are there any questions regarding updates for Public Works tree crew and planting and so forth?
No. Thanks for your update, Mark. Looked pretty straightforward.
Yeah. That's how I roll. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ricky, I saw you jumped in. Did you have anything else?
No, I didn't want to miss the party completely, so
right.
I just wanted to show up in case y'all had any questions.
All right, good. Are there any other questions or comments before we adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
All right.
Second.
All right. We have to vote on it real quick. So, Patrick.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Sharon.
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
Cecil.
Aye.
Perrin.
Aye.
Dawn.
Aye.
And I vote aye. So we're adjourned. Thank you so much. We are planning a meeting for next month, so we'll see you all then. Thank you so much.
Thanks.